Welcome, everyone, to AURI Connect's Webinar Wednesday, part of AURI Connect's recurring online series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. I'm Dan Scogan, your host on Webinar Wednesdays. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute in Minnesota, with sponsorships from Bremer Bank and Avisen Legal. Now, this program aims to actively engage all participants in the food and ag industry to improve competitiveness of producers, businesses, and entrepreneurs through ongoing, purposeful connection of resources and partners along the value chain, and increased knowledge of opportunities, technologies, and trends. And it meets the AURI mission to accelerate the expansion of the agricultural economy by empowering expanded uses and markets of agriculturally derived products. Remember, this event is being recorded and archived and can be found at auri.org. Remember that you will be muted during our presentations, but you can send us your written questions through the Q&A portal on the screen. Today, we begin a two-part series on challenges in the food entrepreneur ecosystem, the challenges that they face as they scale their businesses. Joining us today will be Allison Hahn. Allison is the Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota, leading strategy and growth for the organization. And before joining Naturally Minnesota Grow North in 2020, Allison spent 10 years building a holistic understanding of the food product development cycle as a food scientist at Land O'Lakes and Target Corporation, where she also mentored corporate accelerator companies on product development, go-to-market strategies, and scaled production. She also serves as the Director of R&D for the 15/16 Group, a New York City-based consulting firm advising startups in various capacities. Joining us will be Eric Hall, a co-founder and CEO of So Good, So You. Hall is a startup lifer, having founded multiple companies in health, fitness, and wellness services and technologies. Meeting Rita at a yoga studio and connecting with her on their many shared passions, he proposed to her on a beach in Mexico, and within the hour, they were planning the launch of what is now So Good, So You. Thriving on the unique challenges of startup environments, Eric believes his purpose is to build companies that model a prioritization of people and planet as a blueprint for business health and profitability. Also joining us today will be Mike Zastopol. He works in the Ag Marketing and Development Department at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Mike has spent his career providing research and coordination support to health and sustainability initiatives. He's worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and he specializes in the food, agriculture, and public health fields. And we'll have Jason Robinson with us today. In his role as the Business Development Director for Food for the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, Jason works with food clients to develop their businesses to further the value-added development of Minnesota's agricultural products. Prior to joining AURI, Jason spent 19 years in corporate research and development at a Fortune 500 food manufacturer as a product and process developer across a number of food technologies. So with that, Jason, I'll hand it off to you to kind of set the table for us today on this Webinar Wednesday.
Thanks, Dan. Much appreciate the time. As you can see, I'm sharing the camera with Allison Hahn, and I will introduce her in a second. I don't want to take up a lot of time here at the beginning so that we can get directly to our esteemed guests. But I did want to build on your comments, Dan, about AURI's mission and how it relates to the work that our food team does. As a food team, what we've done is adopt a guiding principle that really builds on that mission and defines how we do our work at AURI within the food team. So our goal as AURI's food team is to transform the Midwest's rich agricultural resources into sustainable food businesses by providing affordable access to consumer and food science expertise and infrastructure. And how we do that is by working both one-to-one on private projects with clients, as well as in the public domain, looking to solve and close ecosystem gaps, many of which you can learn about through previous webinars that are available on our website here at auri.org. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison and get out of the camera. Allison, again, is the Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota, and she'll share her perspective on ecosystem gaps, the scaling business needs here in our ecosystem, and Naturally Minnesota's work to address those challenges. Allison, over to you.
First off, thank you so much to Jason and the entire AURI team for having me join you today. They are extremely close collaborators with us at Naturally Minnesota. They show up at a lot of the things we do, and so we're always happy to be a part of what they're working on. And I also realized I need to send you guys an updated background, or just stop at Naturally Minnesota. No longer the director of R&D for 1516 Group, so we'll just update that one on the back end. But for those of you who do not know, Naturally Minnesota, formerly Grow North, is a nonprofit organization. We live at the University of Minnesota, at the Carlson School of Business, at the Holmes Center of Entrepreneurship. And we exist to serve food and ag entrepreneurs. So what that means is we work with companies from ag tech through the entire value chain to a lot of CPG brands that you see on shelf at your local retailers. And the way we do that is through roughly 40 or so events every year. And those events come to life in the form of a lot of education. So historically, we've done a lot of, webinars, but this year we're really focusing and doubling down on more involved workshops that are 1 to 2 days long. We really want to get hands-on with entrepreneurs. The feedback we've gotten is that you can Google, you can find webinars on almost anything at all times, but it really takes getting a little bit deeper understanding and some handholding to help those entrepreneurs cross whatever bridges they're facing. We also are really founder focused. So we have founder forums that we do in conjunction with Finovation Lab. They have a monthly community day. It's the last Wednesday of every month. So if you're in the ecosystem, highly encourage you to check that out and participate. It's a great way to meet folks, hear some fun topics, and just get engaged in the ecosystem. We also do some large networking events. So unlike other organizations in our ecosystem, we're not an economic development agency in the classic form. I don't have a suite of consultants on hand to do work with clients, but we do interface with all of those organizations. And so we really want to make sure that when people come to us, we have a really broad understanding of the landscape of resources and can kind of help folks navigate to what they need at the right time. So having large networking events is a great way for us to have, be that front door. People can come, meet folks, eat, drink, be merry. And it's a really great way just to kind of see who's out there. And we often have local brands showcasing. So it's a great chance to see who are some up and coming companies. And then we also do a fair amount of experiential tours. So think about farm tours, manufacturing tours. In March of this year, we're going to go to Northern Diversified, which is a THC manufacturer. Obviously, with the changes in Minnesota's legislation, there's a lot happening in that space. So if you really want that kind of unwrapped or behind the curtains look, the experiential tours are a great way to get involved. And then the two other big pieces that we do, one is around Food Ag Ideas Week, which is our big conference in the fall. It's the ultimate convening moment. It's panels, tours, education, gatherings, everything just to, really bring together our whole ecosystem. And then the last is a program we do in conjunction with AURI and MBOLD. And MBOLD is a coalition of all the major food and ag companies in town. It basically consists of all these on screen. So Cargill, General Mills, Schwan's, Target, Compeer, AgriGrowth. You can see the whole gamut. They have a couple of pillars of work. One of them is around entrepreneurship. And the entrepreneurship pillar, we have the Bold Growth Program. So there's a lot of wonderful accelerators and things out in the world. This program is actually for companies in the $5 to $50 million space from a revenue standpoint. And what we do is we take 4 companies, year-long program, and they get very highly customized and tailored support that are specific to advancing goals that they have for growing their business. And the fun thing is that we are taking applicants for that until this Friday. So if you know a company in that space who would love to get the short circuit into Target or Cargill or General Mills or any of those other companies, please do encourage them to apply. And so all that to say, when we think about, why that program came to be, the other types of things we do when we look and think about our ecosystem here in Minnesota, we're in a really unique space. Minnesota has an incredible legacy in the food and ag space. The University of Minnesota, where Jason and I are right now, is a land-grant university. Norman Borlaug, father of the Green Revolution, started here. We're a top 5 ag producing state. We clearly have an incredible amount of legacy companies in the Fortune 500 space here, from both ingredients, processing, and CPG companies. We are centrally located in the US from a supply chain standpoint, and we also have access to 10% of the world's fresh water supply with Lake Superior. So when you think about and we also have the highest number of food scientists in the country, which as a former food scientist, I always enjoy that fun fact. But so when you think about where we sit, we have just an overabundance of resources. And within all those companies, we have an overabundance of expertise and knowledge in the humans that are living and working here. And so what's wonderful about that is we have an incredible richness to our ecosystem. However, often we are not thought of as the, it girl place for food and ag innovation. And part of the problem that we have seen, and I know as Jason alluded to, some of their previous webinars have highlighted this, there's a couple of key things that are kind of stifling our ecosystem and the growth of companies within. The biggest one is a lack of access to capital. Getting funding for a business is the #1 question I get from every single entrepreneur I talk to. We have a lack of capital, especially when it comes to venture funding. People have to go to the coast to find it. But it's also really murky waters to kind of sort through and figure out what types of capital make sense for what stage you're at, and how do you get non-dilutive capital, and don't take too much money too soon from other things, and what is the allocation of that capital. So really demystifying that, having capital partners step up and create products that really work for early stage companies is really important, especially on the small banking side. But it's very important for us as an ecosystem to support the capital piece. And shameless plug, we have a capital access workshop at the end of the month that talks about those stages of revenue and what people should go for. So if you know an entrepreneur who has that question, please direct them to that. We'd love to see them there. It's on Friday, the 26th. The second is around lack of mid-stage manufacturing. And this is not a unique problem to Minnesota. This is a national problem. And what we see is people start a company, they'll maybe produce it at their home, then they'll go to a commercial kitchen or shared kitchen. And when they start adding retailers and they end up not having enough space, capacity, or manpower to help them produce their company or produce their product. And when they go to a co-manufacturer, they often don't have the volumes required. They cannot pay for the line time. They're just unable to get onto the lines to get their product produced. And so there's a dearth of mid-stage manufacturing. And the reason for that is that it's challenging. It's more expensive. When you think about smaller companies, smaller run times, you're not getting the economies of scale you normally would from a larger company and larger product run. And so the lack of manufacturing here is a big issue. And I will happily quote the AURI study that said a 5% investment in manufacturing in Minnesota would yield an $11 billion increase in GDP and the creation of 160,000 jobs. So a great option for this. And we have a subgroup that we like to work on in this piece of figuring out, is it repurposing existing manufacturing? Is it helping people build this? Green versus repurposing is always an interesting question. Or is it really leaning into the public-private partnership sector for this? I know in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, they have a government-run built facility, and the government has paid for the construction and the early operation of that. And it's a way to take that capital off the books, and then they're able to provide pricing for smaller companies in order to do that. So I think we'll have to figure out some creative ways in Minnesota to build that mid-stage manufacturing. So we're enabling the companies that have a right to win to continue to grow. Which leads me probably to one of the last points when I think about barriers to innovation locally. And that is entrepreneurs really need to understand where they should be playing when it comes to what type of company they're building. Some people love the farmer's market. They want to go have a good time and share their family recipe with the world, and that's perfect for them. Others want to have what we'd maybe call a lifestyle business where they can make a living on it, support their families, and they're happy to do it at that size and scale. And then others have big dreams of, I want to create the next big product and then have it be bought by General Mills and have a big exit like, the Boom Chicka Pops or the Dots Pretzels of the world. And part of it is understanding, does that entrepreneur know which route they want to go down? And then it's also, is their product or company allowed for that route? Do they have a big enough point of differentiation? Is the market share that in that space? Do they have a delicious product? Is it something people are going to be willing to buy? There's a ton of things they need to think about and understand if they would even be able to go down that path. So understanding that dynamic is really important for us, not having I would say a funnel, not a tunnel. We want to make sure the right companies are advancing to the next stages here. And then we have the resources to support them. And the final thing that I'll probably mention before I turn it back to Jason and not take up any more time is, Minnesota is a unique space in that we have the largest number of co-ops in the nation. However, we don't have any, aside from Target, which is a national retailer, we don't have any retailers that are in the 1 to 200 store count, regional hubs here. And what that means is for companies who start in local retail here with maybe a smattering of a few, and then get into the Kowalskis and the Lunds and Byerlys, where they can add 10 to 20 stores at a time. If they try to go to a larger retailer, we're talking about a gap of going from in 50 stores to 500 stores. And that amount of scaling is really challenging for these companies to do. So having the right omni-channel strategy and the retailer strategy and finding partners both locally and regionally. And Target is an incredible partner. They often do regional store tests and things like that, but they're a later stage company. So we have to really work on figuring out the partnerships locally that bridge that gap from a retailer standpoint, because that is another piece of the scaling that ends up being a big barrier for a lot of companies we have locally. And with that, I am going to pause and turn it back to Jason. And again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation.
Thanks, Allison. All right, coming back in just very quickly. Thank you to Allison for her perspective and insights. What we'd like to do now is we'd actually like to turn it over to somebody who has been doing this and has fought through the battles and overcome challenges to scale an amazing business right here in our own backyard in Minnesota. So Eric Hall, CEO of So Good So You, I'll turn it over to you to share your story. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Allison. Also, thanks to AURI for hosting this webcast. And I will say, Allison, I was reflecting back on all of the work that you're saying with Naturally Minnesota right now, and those are phenomenal resources that I wish were available when we started. And I hope that more people do take advantage of those programs. While I cannot tell anyone on this webcast or anyone I ever meet how to run their business, I can share our experience. And if that adds value, great. So for those that don't know our company, we are a functional beverage brand and manufacturer. We're based here in Minneapolis, and our hero product is this probiotic juice shot. We've been around for about 10 years. And what I can do is share the story that we've had, share the support we had, and also talk about the support I wish we had. The first thing to start, the why we do it, our brand values. So there's a lot on this slide, but the reality is it comes down to two main focuses for our company of the why. And the first is our focus on diversity, and the second is on sustainability. On diversity, we are female-owned majority, and that female empowerment goes through our entire organization, which is over 70% female. That goes from board level, C-suite, all the way down. We also have over 50% BIPOC workforce right now. On the sustainability side, we run a zero-waste manufacturing facility. It's powered 100% by renewable energy, and as far as I'm aware, we're the only national beverage brand to have an accelerated biodegradable bottle. I would say none of this is perfect, but it's a lens that we put decisions through every day to see how can we be better stewards to our communities, our team members, and the world. Entrepreneurial milestones. The reality is that in 10 years, it's been a journey. We started out as a 16-ounce cold pressed juice company. We also had juice bars, and at one point we had a juice truck. But back at that time, and I think, Allison, of your comment about mid-stage manufacturing and the challenges of finding that, we definitely found that challenge to be true 10 years ago. And so at that time, we ended up building out our own facility. It was small, a couple of thousand square feet, but it was enough to be able to provide the juice shops and get into wholesale as well as provide that juice truck. And what happened is that we were able to grow very quickly from 2014 to 2016 as a regional juice brand. But by that time, the market had shifted, right? You had consumer sentiments going anti-sugar, even if it was natural. We were selling a premium product, which meant it was over $5 price point. So scaling that into mass or into the everyday markets had barriers. And candidly, there was a lot of other great juice brands by that time on the coasts. And so bringing our product to California or to New Jersey or New York would be like bringing water to the ocean. What we were able to do is we were able to use that as a catalyst and proof of concept to get some external capital and iterate. So we had a lot of different product lines that we tried as a manufacturer and a brand over the next 2 years. All of them were learning opportunities. What I can say is that by 2018, we were able to launch what is now our hero item, which is the wellness shots. And when we started to see the success of that and able to listen to consumers to say what they wanted and how they wanted to receive it, we found something that we could start to build our company around and potentially a brand. So we got rid of all the noise. We got rid of the extra product lines. We got rid of the cafes, definitely that juice truck, and then be able to give the team the focus to be able to grow and nurture that growth to where we are today. And so where we are today, I'm proud to say that we've had phenomenal growth for the past 5 years. We've been one of Inc. 5000's fastest growing privately held companies for the past 4 years, a Bain Insurgent brand. And nationally, we are the number 4 by dollars functional beverage brand out of 273 brands. We're the number 1 juice shop brand by dollars and velocities, but we look at the category and say, how do we rank there? And how can we be closer towards our goal of being the number 1 functional beverage brand? Let's talk about support. So when we started, as I mentioned, we had to figure out what it meant to be a food manufacturer. And for that, we ended up reaching out to the University of Minnesota. And there was a wonderful woman there at the time, Joellen Feertag, who helped us create our HACCP plan. And I wish I could say that was a simple process. In retrospect, I know what to do now. But at that time, without that level of support from the University of Minnesota, I'm not certain if we would have been able to protect the food safety and comply with the legal, with the laws necessary in order to open that facility. As we continue to grow, there were great programs through the Minnesota Department of Ag, 3 that I can think of right now. So the first one is a value-added grant program. Where that came to play for our company is as we continued to grow and as we realized the need to be able to scale our manufacturing from a small to larger footprint, the value-added grant allowed us to be able to have assistance to grant capital to help subsidize and support the equipment that we put in our facility. Additional programs that have added value for us, they have a Make in Minnesota program, I believe. I think that's the current title of it. What it comes down to is that there's sponsorship for trade shows. I know Minnesota Department of Ag has, blocks at Expo West and other great trade shows, but if you're not attending those shows and you are a Minnesota-based company, then you have access to be able to use those grants towards merchandising in stores or any trade shows you want. And the final one is that they have a new markets program. And where that comes to play is being able to help entrepreneurs, again, within the Minnesota ecosystem, to be able to explore new channels. So if you're thinking of going into club, if you're thinking of going into Canada, right, you can use that sponsorship to be able to help subsidize the cost for you to be able to be more informed as a business owner and then evaluate if that decision is the right one for your company. I also can say about that same time prior to 2020, the predecessor to Naturally Minnesota was called Grow North. And at that time, one of their programs is that they sponsored a CEO roundtable, additional thought partnership, sharing the challenges of the entrepreneurial journey. And the support there provided a lot of thought partnership in a formative stage. As we continue to grow, back in 2021, we were honored to be the inaugural class of that Bold Growth Program. And that's the one that Allison was mentioning earlier, where the large companies in Minnesota, Targets, Cargills, Hormels, et cetera, Schwann's, have gotten together and basically said, how can we do things collaboratively that we're doing siloed, things that are non-competitive, sustainable packaging, workforce diversity. And one of the things is they said, how can we support the Minnesota ecosystem? And again, there's guardrails on it. Currently, you have to be a $5 to $50 million company. But the idea is, where can they provide thought partnership and strategic support to help that growth? And so we were honored to be part of that program. And I can say it provided a lot of value for us in thought partnership on being able to help us elucidate down the clarity of focus to turn that into a retailer story, and then to be able to see how that can scale to other retailers, other channels, and support the growth. One second. What I can also share is there is a lot of support that I wish we had. And I'm proud to say, in a conversation just earlier this week, I know that many of these things through Naturally Minnesota are available today. So when I look back, it's about trying to figure out the type of company and size you want. And I believe Allison mentioned this too. You know, if you're looking to be at a farmer's market, that's a great business. If you're looking to be a sole proprietor and just run it yourself, that's a great business model. If you are looking to build a national CPG brand, then there's other support and other lenses you need to be able to look at. You need to be able to understand your P&L fundamentals, specifically looking at your product margin and how it relates to the long-term viability of a business. Because if your growth is, I've got this wonderful product, I can make it at home or I can make it in a kitchen and my friends love it, but the behind the scenes financials of that, scaling that is going to be very problematic. And so being able to understand and assess the reality of your vision to the viability of the end goal that you're looking for, the sooner you can do that, the better. The second level of support, which I know is available now too, is how to effectively build velocity, or more importantly, how you can listen to consumers, because they will tell you with their shopping behaviors if your product is responding organically or if it's not. And if it's not, that does not mean it cannot be a viable product. What it does mean is that your business model and plan needs to take that into account, and that you need, rather than making your shelf work harder, you need to start investing much earlier in brand awareness and top of the funnel marketing, which may or may not be as effective as a business model you'd like. And the last part about the support that I wish was there, which I know is right now, goes down to that listening to consumers. And I will say that when I look back on our entrepreneurial journey, it took us about 5 years to really understand what that meant. And so when I break up our company, the first 5 years was us as founders learning what it meant to listen to consumers, what it meant to be a CPG brand, and what it meant to be a manufacturer. And so by the time that we iterated long enough to find what is now our hero item, we knew the fundamentals of that P&L and product margin. We knew the velocity metrics when we saw something was strong or very strong. We knew the channel strategy on how we wanted to go to market in a way that we felt would support that velocity on shelf and be a profitable business decision. And all of those things are available today through the Minnesota ecosystem as thought partnership and support that can help anyone evaluate where they are today, where they want to get to, and create that roadmap and viability assessment. And with that, I will hand it back, I believe, to Jason.
Thanks, Eric. That was awesome. Really appreciate you taking that time to kind of walk through your journey and really showcase what was missing from your journey and highlight what's still to build and the resources that exist today. So thank you for that. Now we'll turn it over to Mike Zastapol, who'll tell us a little bit more about a new one-time funding opportunity that is here to support growing Minnesota businesses. And this is really an effort that will help to supplement some of the already awesome work that the MDA's Make It Minnesota program has already been doing to support small and growing Minnesota food businesses. So Mike, with that, let me turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, AURI, for having me. It's a pleasure. So my name is Mike Zastapol. I work at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture as a food system planner. And so I am the coordinator for this new federal funding opportunity through the USDA called the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program. And this is funding that came about through the American Rescue Plan Act, and really in response to COVID and the supply chain disruptions and bottlenecks that we saw during that time. So the specific purpose of the funding is to invest in what they define as the middle of the food supply chain, to expand capacity, help businesses expand, and therefore increase resiliency in our local and regional food systems. It is specifically for food, meant for human consumption, and it does exclude meat and poultry because there are several other programs out there and funding opportunities out there that are specifically focused on meat and poultry processing and other supply chain issues. Each state received a certain amount of funding. Minnesota received $12.25 million in a cooperative agreement with the USDA. And of that, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture is planning to give out $9.6 million in grants for organizations doing this work. Aside from administration costs, we also have $1 million available for complementary technical assistance, which we will cover a little bit in part 2 of this webinar series. So just to give you a timeline, our cooperative agreement began in May of this year, and it's a 4-year cooperative agreement, so it will end in May of 2027. We are working hard at the agency to have our grant request for proposals released by the end of January, and we're hoping to have that open through March. So as long as possible, about 3 months to give people enough time to put together their grant proposals. After we do our review, the USDA will do their own review in early summer, and we're hoping to have these grant awards out by early fall of this year. So let's talk more about the grants in detail. The middle of the food supply chain, how the USDA defines it is here. Aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storage, you name it. An easy way to think about it is everything after production of the agricultural product on the farm and before it's sold or donated to the final consumer. So the minimum award of these grants is $100,000 up to $3 million. So these are larger, potentially larger grants than the MDA typically offers. It's, again, kind of a unique opportunity. There is a match required, and you can qualify for a reduced 25% match if you qualify as one of these eligible applicants listed here. And these are all USDA definitions. You can look on their website or our website once we have it up with the request for proposals. So just to give an example, if your project is upgrading or expanding your food processing facility, it's a $1 million project. If you qualify as one of these organizations or types of organizations, then you could get $750,000 in federal funds with $250,000 in match. So just to give some examples, this funding, again, infrastructure is right in the name. This is for building a new facility. It could be a warehouse or a processing facility. It could be just expanding or upgrading things at your facility. That includes upgrading equipment or IT systems, energy efficiency, maybe things that will help you meet food safety regulations. That's part of your expansion needs. And it's also for a little bit of capacity things, such as employee training that goes along with expanding your business. So who's eligible? That's everybody's curious. So these are the groups that the USDA identified: producers, nonprofits, governments, institutions. Of course, for-profit businesses are eligible, but they must qualify as a small business according to the Small Business Administration. And if you go to the SBA's website, there is a tool that can help you figure out what's your business, if it qualifies or not. And it does depend on your industry and what type of business you have. Basically, what's important to remember is that whatever organization you qualify as, whether a business or not, you must be doing this kind of work that is in the middle of the food supply chain, aggregation, processing, storage, as you can see. And finally, there are some applications that we will be prioritizing. Some of these priorities are from the USDA. Some are from our own agency that we, through outreach that we did this last summer, gathering public input. The first is that any applications that are submitted by cooperatives or farmer or worker-owned enterprise will receive priority. There's a priority for projects that focus on dairy, grains, fruits and vegetables, dry beans, or aquaculture. And also priority if the applicant can demonstrate that they have family supporting job quality and treatment and safety of workers. And that includes, things like benefits. It could be a policy at your workplace, et cetera. And finally, I think this would be right in alignment with the AORI mission. There is priority for value-added products that are new and expanding options for consumers. So that's an exciting priority. And with that, I encourage you to reach out to our agency with questions. Please use our team email here, mda.rfsi@state.mnus. And thank you for the time. I appreciate it. I'll pass it back to Dan.
Well, thanks, Mike. Good information. And I'm going to put a couple of our presenters on the spot a little bit. We're getting some great questions from our audience today. Keep those coming in. Just put them in the Q&A portal, and we will get to as many as we can. Mike, while I have you here, how much wiggle room is there on some of those priorities that you laid out for those who are applying? And will there be another round of applications? And will they be able to stack if they are successful once? Can they go back and try to add something to their grant program? And you are okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. So far as the priority categories, I think, the application, you can make your case. Again, as they're listed, we will be following that pretty closely. So far as another round of funding, so there will be only one round of this infrastructure type grant, as we're calling it. If for some reason there is funding left over, we do have the option to provide a second round of funding, and those would be smaller grants, less than $100,000, and just for equipment. But honestly, I'm anticipating that we'll use up all that money and have plenty of applicants, hopefully.
Eric, several questions have come in around your presentation. How did you get the consumer feedback in order to hone in on your hero product?
Yeah, great question. So two ways. First of all, we were fortunate enough to have retail operations at that time. So we had 3 juice bars. And candidly, at that time, we did do juice shots. It was a little more of a ritual and experience. We'd have people come in and there'd be like mixologists, and we'd have the juice ginger shot there with a little bit of honey and a orange slice on the top, kind of like tequila. And we would notice that at 10 a.m. in the downtown central business district, we would have 3, 10, 8 groups of people coming from offices. And candidly, when you start to see a disproportionate part of your P&L coming in on one item, you start to scratch your head and say, I think we may have something. But the reality is that where we saw the success was when we put it on shelf and we saw phenomenal velocities. We're talking top of the category when you look at all functional beverage in the set velocities. And when you're able to put something on a shelf that consumers organically respond to with minimal investment, meaning trade spend, you do a little promotions, there you have something that, at least for me, we could build a business around. Since then, we have invested in qualitative and quantitative research, but candidly, 5.5 years ago, we didn't have the resources or the knowledge to be able to do that. So what I could say was that in 5 years, we had 6 different product lines that we put on shelf. All did well enough to maintain their shelf presence. But when you found one that consumers were just buying in high velocities, then you knew you had something unique.
I think you answered my follow-up question. I was just going to ask you how you knew you'd made it. Was it with that consumer energy?
I don't know if I knew we made it. I'm not sure if I still feel that yet. But tell me more. What do you mean by that question?
Well, I think it just, for a food entrepreneur or beverage entrepreneur to put something out there, at some point the light goes on and says, I think we've got the right thing.
It was the velocities, but I will say that a lot of the learnings went into that prior. And these are learnings that I'm happy to share, but also are part of the great programs that Naturally Minnesota is putting on now. And that is getting back to the fundamentals. So for example, cold pressed juice, the one we first launched, Juice Cleanses, 16-ounce juices, it is an incredibly expensive cog, right? In other words, your product margin is compressed by that. And if you are spending a lot of money just being able to create that product, you obviously have a barrier of what you can sell a product and where it can scale. And you can start to see just on your model, what is your total addressable market? And so it's great to be able to have a vision and say, I've got this wonderful product and I'm going to take it everywhere. But the ability to be able to have someone come in and assess with you, what are those metrics? How much resources will you actually have to scale? And being able to say, where can you take this, right? Is your market farmers markets? Is it just Whole Foods? There's great products in a co-op and in Whole Foods that will never make it into conventional retailers like Safeway and Albertsons. And normally it's for one of 3 reasons. It's too niche of an item. It is a too high of a price point, or it's that, boy, does it taste healthy. And none of those are barriers to having a successful business. But as an entrepreneur, being able to know that your market is going to be restricted to that, as opposed to having the vision and trying to take capital and trying to force growth, it's just being able to have that insight earlier. And so that was the learnings we had, I would say, through experience, which I hope every entrepreneur who's listening right now taps into their network or taps into Naturally Minnesota, the programs at AORI, to be able to get a fast track on those.
Another participant today is asking, you mentioned zero waste. Curious what you do with your fruit and vegetable byproduct.
Yeah, great question. We initially were bringing it to the city compost. I can say that our business model has shifted. So initially, when we first started, our idea was we just wanted to bring it out to pig farms. I can tell you that the amount of time we spent 10 years ago trying to figure out the laws and anti-dumping laws in Minnesota did not add value. What we did end up doing is we ended up taking it to the Minnesota compost. However, right now, what we have done is we've shifted over the way we make products. And while they still do convert raw fruits and vegetables and have some level of waste from that, most of it now is partnering with local producers in their area to be able to convert the product into juice and then bring that frozen juice to Minnesota. And what we have found is that, number one, it is a fresher product. It is a better cost of goods, and it is a much better ecological footprint. So rather than taking 4 pounds of ginger from Peru, bringing it to Minnesota with a pound going to waste in transit and converting that to a pound of juice, we now are only importing or bringing in 1 pound of juice. And so it's just worked better for the model. So the flip side is now we have a lot of steel drums. And what do we do with those? And so we've added compactors on site. We've brought them to recycling. We've repurposed them when we could donate them elsewhere. And so, as I mentioned earlier, nothing in our business model is perfect, but what it is it's intentional. And we look everything through that lens of how can we be better? And that is not a one-stop shop. It is not a great, we've checked the box here. Every year, we're continually improving and looking at everything in our company with every team member's eyes, lens, experience, and authority to see how can we be better tomorrow than we were today.
Got a
So
wild card
add
question
on-
here. Pardon?
Dan, I just want to add on one thing to Eric's comments right now.
Perfect.
You'll hear that he talks about when you ask like, oh, how did you know when you'd made it? And he's like, I don't know if we still have made it yet, right? It's a continuous journey. And people often think, oh, when I get to this next stage, it'll be easier. Or when I get to this next stage, these won't be problems anymore. And what he just highlighted is you may not have the same problems, but you will continue to have problems you have to tackle. And I think that is a key tenet of an entrepreneur mindset of you have to know it is a continuous uphill slog, and it's just different and bigger problems the larger your company becomes. I will also shamelessly plug at that Founders Forum at the end of this month. If you are enjoying all of Eric's comments, you can come hear them in person at the Founders Forum at the Finovation Lab, where we will have him and Nora Shaper from High Bar talking about their retailer journey and what they would have done differently. So, if you want to get that in-person experience, come network with other founders. He is so gracious with his time and his knowledge and expertise. So I will shout out for that and say thank you to him publicly because he is so wonderful in sharing all of his expertise. Back to you, Dan.
And that's what we need. Allison, while I've got you here, I'm going to ask you, as you listen to Mike, is that the kind of gap fixing
Yes.
that we need?
100%. Everything he highlighted on there, I know there was a question around where the funds are coming from. So Mike, I think it's federal funding, but you can answer that one officially. But yeah, either, green building obviously is very expensive. If you can retrofit existing infrastructure and outfitting it to be mid-stage manufacturing, I can tell you that I've already talked to a handful of groups of people who are interested in doing this. And the first thing I tell them is there's this grant coming, you should certainly apply because it is so capital intensive. And that is one of the most prohibitive parts of why people don't do it is you have to have a lot of capital either to stand up operations or to run them. So I will say there are a number of projects in the works in the cities. The Upper Harbors Terminal is one. Neon is currently building. At the Tubman Foundation, they're looking at retrofitting. So there's a handful of people who are looking at doing this, but I will say one place will not solve the problem. We do need all of these places to stand up and support different parts of the manufacturing process. So
Both you and Jason talked about collaboration and partnerships, and we do have a question around that. How can local vegan and vegetarian community organizers be helpful in supporting, encouraging, and mentoring those who might be interested in these aligned opportunities? I don't know if Jason or you, Allison, or maybe.
what are the, I guess my question is, what are the aligned opportunities? What is that referencing? Does anybody remember?
Not sure what they meant by that. But
I
if-
will say there are, at Food Ag Ideas Week this past year, we really focused a lot on regenerative and plant-based and alternative, knowing that to sustainably feed the planet, we're gonna have to do that in a smarter, more sustainable way. It is hard because I would say plant-based and vegan is still a relatively small niche part of the population. To Eric's point around why people may not jump certain co-ops, if it tastes too healthy, you're never going to capture the broad market. So I often tell people your product has to be delicious. And often, I know the labeling of that can really capture the people who care about it, but sometimes it's, if you just have a really delicious product that happens to be that, you may not want to call it out. There's might be some interesting A/B testing on labeling to try there, just because sometimes that becomes too much of a turnoff for those. But I think Jason is eager to chime in here. He's slowly inching into the
Slowly
frame.
inching into the frame. No, the only thing I would add to what Allison said is, specifically related to the question around how can these local organizations provide support. The thing that I would just say is get involved. Don't segregate yourself from the broader community, because at the end of the day, understanding all of the challenges associated with each niche opportunity or just in general, the challenges that many of these organizations have, they don't come out until we hear about them as a large group. So get involved, become a member of Naturally Minnesota, and have your voice be heard. Because you'll find a place to plug in, you'll find a place to be of use to the community, to the broader ecosystem, and your perspective is valued. So make sure that you're involved so we can hear what you have to say, because every perspective is important when we're trying to solve these big challenges to support the growth that Allison outlined earlier, the growth potential by in our state GDP. So I'll pop back out of frame. Thank
All
you.
right, I see Eric is a veteran of the Zoom call. He's got his hand up, so we're going to go to him. He'd like to add something to this conversation.
Yeah, I'll say, we have had a lot of great support from the local community. I remember being at Twin Cities Veg Fest, and I would say that from a CPG standpoint, if there is a local product that meets your standards and you really love, get the word out, right? Have them supported in stores. If they're not there in the local co-ops, have them ask. These are things that are, all the great support that we're talking about here. The reality is that any business needs to be able to create product and get it in consumers' hands through a retail setting to keep the doors open. And so if there is a nut-based cashew cheese or something like that, and you're like, this is a great local company, get the word out through your network, help that company be able to get distribution by asking for it at retailers and supporting it once it's there.
And Mike, let's go back to you and talk about the funding and the how this infrastructure funds are being funded. We did have a question about that.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have entered into a cooperative agreement with them as kind of a pass-through to get these grants out. So that's the answer to that question. And I will say this is a unique opportunity. It does happen to be vegetarian, you're right, by excluding meat and poultry. So that is an interesting point.
Mike, are you a one-man team on this project, or does MDA
No.
line up a team to take care of this?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, we do have an entire team. In fact, we've hired one person, and we plan to hire a couple more. So just because of the extent of the work involved in this. So yeah, so I do prefer if you could use the general email address that I shared in the PowerPoint slides. That would be the best way to reach us. Definitely.
Great. Lots of questions coming in. If artificial intelligence is used to enhance the flavor tones of the fruits and vegetables, does that still count for this program? I think that might be directed to you, Mike.
Yeah, could you repeat that again, actually?
If artificial intelligence is used to enhance the flavor tones of the fruits or vegetables, does that still qualify for this program or count for this program is how they wrote it?
That's an interesting question. Potentially, if it's adding value and that's part of the, processing of the products, then yes.
Eric, you've got a lot of support up in northwestern Minnesota at Manna Foods out of Detroit Lakes. They love your product. They sent a comment in earlier. And now a question for you. What did collaboration with local retailers look like in the early stage for you? Were some retailers better collaborators than others? And if so, what were those traits or activities that were helpful to you? I think what they're getting around to is if we're going to try to get into some of these places and show off our product, who should we be talking to and who makes the best collaborators?
Oh, it depends on the products, but I will say the local retailers here, and this is not false praise, are phenomenal. In the cities, Lunds and Byerly's, Kowalski's, the co-ops, co-op partners for distribution, there's always been a very great support for Minnesota-made products. As for a tactic, obviously, if you are new to CPG, go in and ask. Right? Talk to a store manager and say, hey, how would I get my product here? How can I introduce? If it's not within their authority, they'll tell you who it is and how to do that. Once you have that opportunity to be in that store, then monitor it. If you have access to data, great. If you don't, because you're just starting out, that's okay too. But be high touch point, because the reality is that once you're in a store, you get that opportunity once. If for some reason that does not, no pun intended, bear fruit, and you're pulled off of that shelf, it's about 2 years till you have that opportunity again. And there's also in many retailers a legacy in the national data of what happened. And so the tactic of being able to, let's say you just start a new product and you go to 5 local co-ops or you go to Kowalski's and you have the opportunity to be on their shelf. If you don't have the data, just ask the buyer and say, hey, I want to make certain that we're adding value to you. And by value, I mean, I want to make sure that my product is doing well. And if it's not, I want to have an opportunity to help grow brand awareness or product awareness. And so, 30 days in, is it selling? Is it not? If it's not selling, then you can look at demos or trade spend tactics, etc. Each marketing tactic has its own benefit. I can say for us, our journey has been that we are not demo heavy. And the reason being is that they're incredibly expensive as you scale. That being said, they are an effective tactic to be able to start building awareness for products. So again, I can't tell someone what to do for their company. I can share our experience, but I hope those kind of answered the question.
Participant has a follow-up though. They have an ice cream business with a
Awesome.
co-partner. Their goal is to go outside of Minnesota in 2025.
Okay.
So the question is, what were the biggest things that helped you grow from being local to regional?
Syndicated data, hands down. We invested early on with Spins through a package, and I'm not sure, Allison, is that package still available, do we think?
It is. I was just going to tag on to your last comments around a couple of resources we have on our website. So from a list of retailers, we have a major list of retailers and brokers. So if you are looking to expand, you can check that out. Spins has a deal with just Naturally Minnesota and Naturally Minnesota members, and membership is $100 for the year and it pays for itself. So like well worth it. But you can get $40,000 worth of data for about 10K or less, which is a huge investment. But Eric, again, was very gracious this past summer to do a session around the use of data and how it transformed their business and business decisions. So I will +1 on the importance of getting as much data as you can get. Also, if you are a Minnesota resident, you can go to any of the U of M libraries and gain access to all of the Mintel. A lot of the major data syndicates, they have access to them in those libraries, and you just need to show your ID. So if you want to go get some free data and information to start building decks and things like that for retailers, go do that. And then on the last resource push, he was talking about making sure you know, your financial house is in order, understanding your COGS, you know, who's taking cuts at every step of the way. That's a really important piece of the puzzle to set your company and product lines up for financial success in the long run. And in February, we will have a retail readiness workshop that really digs into that. So it's going to be limited spots, but it's really going to get into the details on making sure you have your house in order and understand the financial viability of your business. But Eric, back to you.
Thank you.
Uh,
And I want to, I'll be very quick because I know we're coming close to the end here, but to specifically answer the question, how did data help? Whenever you go into a retailer, they're trying to assess or de-risk the work that's going to go into of taking something off a shelf and putting you on. And if you're able to show them the data of how you rank in a certain store, they can say, I may not have your product, but I have this other ice cream there. And if they're selling at 10 units a store per week and you're selling at 6, I can understand as a percentage kind of where you are going to play in. And so that helps de-risk that decision for them. And so that was probably the biggest unlock that we had. And I cannot shamelessly plug, although we have no affiliation with them at all, that Spins package. They were very gracious, I will say, to bring that package down, because when we started negotiating that package on behalf of Naturally Minnesota, it was a $25,000 package. And so please, 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 if you're looking, I know it's a great investment. I know it's a lot of money early stage, but if you're looking at scaling outside of the state, it's the data.
And Eric, what funded you early on? Or even now?
Self-funded originally. My wife and I self-funded. We had an early seed investor. We then went through lots of friends and families cutting checks, and then went through in 2016 a local family fund. We finally in 2020 did take private equity fund, but that's the first and only institutional fund we've ever had.
And Allison, what types of capital are typically lacking for these food businesses?
Short answer, all. But I would say, you know, for early stage, a lot of it is going to be friends and family. The hard part, right, is if you come from a historically marginalized background, so women or people of color, you don't have friends and family that have, you know, extra cash to cut checks for you. So early stage funding, you know, Groove Capital is a great example of early stage investment, but there's just not enough of it around, both locally and nationally. And the really hard part is a lot of people invest in tech, software, med tech, health tech, things like that, which have a very different timeline of return on investment, and they have often slightly higher returns. And so if people aren't used to investing in food, there's a lot of hesitation to get involved, and they don't understand what it looks like to do that. So there's just a higher threshold for people to make those investments. What's really unfortunate, again, if you think about how many very well compensated executives in the food industry are in Minnesota, both current and legacy, there's a lot of money floating around. And my call out would be, if you know someone who's in one of those positions, ask them how they're giving back, whether it's of their time and knowledge and mentorship, or do they have the, you know, the flush capacity to maybe make some angel investments? And that can be in 5 or 10,000 increments. You don't have to invest 100K at a time. And Groove does have an angel investor group that I'm a part of, and we make investments through that. So I would definitely say, if you have the ability, support local in that sense. But early stage investment capital is one of the biggest ones. You know, there's grants, loans, there's a lot of different ways to go. I would always say go non-dilutive as long as possible. Do not avoid venture and PE as long as possible. Keep your cap table as clean as possible. Do everything to get your financial house in order first. Strength, you know, make your runway as long as possible before you're forced to do that.
Eric?
And the also, I feel like a broken record here, but focus on the business fundamentals, because when you are going to any investor, or you're taking capital from friends and family, which of course you want to pay back, making certain that the structure, you know, your profitability or product margin, you know, your runway, you have some idea of what type of company you actually want to be and have data to support. Is it a co-op? Is it a natural play? Is it a mass play? That's going to assist you being able to talk to anyone who's looking at putting in capital in a way that adds value and hopefully then can ease that conversation.
I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll go around the room one last time for final thoughts. Can I get a list of Minnesota-based juice and produce businesses? Investment will be maybe principled and filtered and cautious. So I don't know if it's somebody that's looking to invest. Is there a list of people who are putting out juices and produce? I would guess there is to some degree in the state.
Allison, I mean, I can only think
Allison, Mike,
small handful. I think I know most of them, but
I mean, whole produce, isn't that the major one that's local?
yeah, well, I mean, there's Citrus Systems too.
Yeah.
There's us. I apologize. I think we'll have to take that offline. I want to honor it, but I don't know who that's directed to or how we can assist the best. So,
okay, that's fine. We can't make
Yeah.
up answers. So let's.
I mean, we could.
Yeah.
Let's go around the room. Final thoughts, and I'll end with Jason since he's the AURI rep, but let's start at the Department of Agriculture. Mike, what do you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, you know, Allison talked about the barriers today. This is a one-time federal funding opportunity, so definitely take the time to think through a good proposal, get some assistance if you need in writing that grant proposal, and take advantage of it. I think it's a great opportunity.
Eric, final thoughts?
More geared towards entrepreneurs, but you're not alone. And everyone on this call and everyone who's around the ecosystem is here to support you. It is hard when the days are long and the stress is high, but reach out because that is what is needed at any stage of growth.
And Allison from Naturally Minnesota, what do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I mean, I'll shamelessly answer the last question here, which is what organizations, and I would say Naturally Minnesota. You know, our membership is for every facet of the ecosystem. We do want to be founder centric. We know, to Eric's point, it is a lonely road. But the good news is everyone has faced the same problems before. And so the founder forums are a great example of let's take the seasoned experts who've been there, done that, and lived it, and share their expertise, take questions, foster that conversation. And a lot of it's just around building the community and building the ecosystem further. And, you know, please reach out to me directly. I meet with hundreds of entrepreneurs every year. I meet with hundreds of industry and ecosystem leaders. And a big piece of my role is being the Rolodex. And I'm happy to make introductions to help advance your business. So please reach out. I would love to connect. You know, if I don't know the person, I know the person. It's 1 degree of Kevin Bacon in this town. So you know, please do reach out and, you know, show up. I mean, the community is only as strong as the people who make up, you know, the individuals that make it up. So show up, show out, and get engaged.
Jason, you helped bring this group together. How do you want to leave it?
Well, everyone said it the right way. There's not a lot that I can add. I'd make 2 very, very quick comments. The first is, you know, with what Eric's talked about, with what Allison's talked about access to capital and knowing your data and so forth. It all starts with knowing how much it costs you to make the thing you're making. So start there, get it right, get it accurate. And secondly, we're all here to help. So please don't do the typical Minnesotan approach of I will try to do it all myself and not bother anyone, because we're here to help and we want to help.
We want to be bothered.
That's right. Bother us.
There, you got it right from the organizations themselves. Go ahead and bother them. That does conclude AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday for today. I do want to thank Allison Hahn, Eric Hall, Mike Zastapel, and Jason Robinson. AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday is presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. We're interested in your feedback, so we do ask that you respond when we send out our event evaluations. Also, remember, for more information on today's program or any of the work that AURI is involved with, you can go to auri.org. Please join us on February 14th for the second part in this series on specific initiatives and accessible tools to help further bridge gaps in scaling. Join us to hear about the co-manufacturing toolbox, cold storage studies, and the MDA plans to enhance the directory of co-manufacturing and commercial kitchen space in Minnesota. Additionally, other assistance opportunities for local and regional meat processors as well. Watch for more information coming out soon, and you can always learn more about other work that AURI is involved with by going online to auri.org. We're looking forward to having you join us again on February 14th for another AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday.